What if I tell you that everything you see in your bank account, every balance, every withdrawal, every deposit, is not the ultimate truth of your financial reality, but merely a reflection of thoughts you have allowed to dominate your mind, and that from the very moment you begin to understand that your current financial statements are just temporary shadows of what could be, a doorway opens into a world where money is not earned or lost, but imagined and assumed into being. And as you start to see the world through this lens, you realize that scarcity has only ever existed because you have given it attention. And yet the potential to rewrite every limitation exists entirely within the depths of your own consciousness. Which is why the first step in transforming your finances is not to chase numbers or scramble for deals, but to pause and recognize that every lack you have experienced has been a rehearsal for a new story. And the truth of your wealth is not in your account, not in the ledger, not in the bills that arrive or the checks that bounce, but in the vividness of the reality you allow yourself to inhabit every day. And when you begin to immerse in the feeling of already having the abundance you desire, you will notice opportunities appearing in the corners of your life that previously seemed invisible, doors opening that you never knew existed, conversations leading to prospects that feel as though they are being guided by some unseen intelligence. And gradually, the evidence of your imagined prosperity begins to ripple outward into tangible reality, until even your bank account, which once seemed stubborn and unyielding, starts to mirror the richness you have been quietly cultivating in your mind. And you begin to understand that every dollar, every transaction, every financial fluctuation has been waiting for the moment you claim the authority to declare your own abundance. And once that authority is recognized and felt deeply, no external circumstance can dictate your experience of wealth, because the reality that matters most has already been established within. And from this moment on, the journey is not about proving your prosperity to the world, but about consistently living and feeling in alignment with the version of yourself who has always had access to limitless financial freedom. And as this awareness grows, the illusion that your bank account is the ultimate judge fades entirely, replaced by the thrilling realization that you are the creator, the architect, and the resident of a life where wealth is not only possible, but inevitable. As you begin to accept that your true financial reality is determined not by numbers, but by the beliefs and feelings you cultivate, you start to notice that every thought, every fleeting worry about money, and every tiny justification for lack has been quietly shaping your daily experiences. And once this realization settles in, it becomes clear that the key to rewriting your finances is not through frantic work or constant monitoring, but through deliberate and sustained focus on the reality you wish to embody. And as you imagine yourself walking through life with the confidence of someone who has already achieved financial freedom, you find that your mind begins to filter opportunities differently, highlighting avenues that previously went unnoticed and illuminating connections that align perfectly with the wealth you have claimed in your imagination. And it is here, in the quiet acceptance that you are the unseen architect of your monetary destiny, that you begin to apply Neville Goddard's principle of living in the end, where you do not chase money, promotions, or profits, but instead assume the feeling of having already attained them, allowing the energy of abundance to saturate every decision and every interaction. And in this state, you naturally attract experiences and people that reinforce the reality you are cultivating, so that each financial step, whether small or large, feels preordained rather than forced. And as you grow more attuned to the sensation of wealth within, the old anxieties about bills, debt, or scarcity dissolve like mist under the morning sun, leaving you with clarity and confidence. And even moments that once seemed like setbacks are now understood as subtle adjustments guiding you toward greater alignment with your financial vision. And this process is not instantaneous. Yet each repetition of feeling rich and secure strengthens the neural pathways that reinforce prosperity as your default state. And as a result, your subconscious mind begins to automatically seek solutions, ideas, and strategies that serve your financial expansion. And in time, The once rigid numbers in your bank account appear to bend and adjust to match the reality you have been tirelessly imagining, until you can finally step back and recognize that the story you have been telling yourself all along, the story of limitation, struggle, and lack, has been replaced by a narrative of effortless creation, resourcefulness, and abundance. And with every passing day, you find it increasingly effortless to maintain the belief that wealth is not something to be earned externally, but a natural extension of the person you have become in your imagination. And this understanding shifts every choice you make, every conversation you enter, and every action you take, so that living abundantly is no longer a distant aspiration, but the unmistakable and undeniable experience of your everyday life. And as this new awareness settles deeper within you, it becomes impossible to ignore the subtle ways your past conditioning has kept you tethered to financial limitation, where every fear about money, every story of not enough, and every instinct to scrimp or save out of anxiety suddenly appears not as reality, but as patterns you have unconsciously chosen to repeat. And once this recognition emerges, you realize that the Neville Goddard method is not merely about wishful thinking or casual daydreaming, but about deliberately immersing yourself in the feeling of your desired financial state until it becomes the unquestioned truth in your subconscious mind. And when you consistently inhabit this reality, your decisions, behaviors, and even your perception of opportunities begin to shift effortlessly toward abundance, so that even what once felt like random chance, unexpected checks, timely connections, sudden offers, now appears as natural manifestations of the wealth you have assumed. And as you continue to dwell in this imaginative space, you start to see that scarcity was never imposed by external circumstances, the economy, or the market, but by the internal agreements you had silently accepted about money. And when those agreements are consciously rewritten, the external world must inevitably mirror the inner change, leading to a life where finances are no longer a source of stress or distraction, but a seamless reflection of your inner state of abundance. And in this process, the tension that once accompanied every financial decision dissolves, replaced by clarity, creativity, and a profound sense of control over your own prosperity. And as the days pass, you notice that the small steps you take, writing down your goals, visualizing your bank balance, expressing gratitude for what already exists, carry a force that seems to ripple outward, influencing your reality in ways that feel almost miraculous. And yet, these manifestations are simply the logical result of living as though your financial goals are already fulfilled. And this consistency begins to attract mentors, collaborators, and ideas that align perfectly with your imagined success. So that rather than chasing opportunity, opportunity now chases you, drawn to the energy of certainty, belief, and assumption that radiates from your consciousness. And in the quiet moments when doubt threatens to creep in, you remind yourself that your bank account has never been the ultimate measure of your potential. And by continually inhabiting the end of your financial vision, you are steadily, inevitably, and irresistibly drawing into your life the material confirmation of the abundance that has always existed within you. As this understanding deepens, you begin to notice that every instinct to compare your financial journey with others, every glance at someone else's success, and every fleeting sense of envy or inadequacy is nothing more than a distraction from the reality that your wealth is uniquely yours to create. And the moment you stop allowing external measures to dictate your sense of abundance, you open a space where imagination and faith can operate unhindered, allowing you to step fully into the role of a deliberate creator who writes the rules of financial reality rather than obeying the constraints of circumstance. And in this state, you begin to recognize that every lack you have experienced has been a necessary setup, a series of rehearsals designed to sharpen your focus and prepare your consciousness for the magnitude of prosperity you are ready to claim. And as you fully inhabit this perspective, the fear-driven thoughts that once caused sleepless nights and tight shoulders begin to dissolve, replaced by clarity, creative ideas, and an unshakable sense of confidence. And it becomes evident that wealth is less about the external accumulation of money and more about the internal cultivation of belief, imagination, and unwavering expectation. And as you continue to immerse yourself in this inner experience, subtle yet powerful changes start to occur in your external life, where opportunities, insights, and resources appear with astonishing regularity, seemingly orchestrated by forces beyond your immediate comprehension. Yet in truth, they are the inevitable result of the alignment between your inner state and the external world. And the more consistently you dwell in this imagined reality of abundance, the less resistance you encounter, so that even situations that previously felt impossible or out of reach now present themselves as natural stepping stones toward your financial fulfillment. And in these moments, you realize that true wealth has never been about earning, spending, or saving, but about commanding the energy of your consciousness to produce the outcomes you desire. And as this awareness becomes second nature, the former anxieties about bills, debts, or shortages fade into insignificance, leaving behind a life where every decision, every opportunity, and every encounter is filtered through the lens of limitless possibility. And gradually, you begin to operate from a place of certainty and creative authority, where the bank account, which once seemed like a judge, becomes nothing more than a silent witness to the financial reality you have already established in your mind. And as your days unfold, you recognize that abundance is not a distant goal, but the natural, inevitable, and continuous expression of the conscious state you have chosen to inhabit, so that living in wealth becomes less about acquiring and more about consistently being, feeling, and imagining yourself as someone who has already achieved everything you desire. And as you move further into this understanding, it becomes clear that the real transformation does not come from changing your external circumstances first, but from persistently cultivating an inner reality where abundance is assumed, lived, and felt so tangibly that it overrides any evidence to the contrary. And in this process, you begin to see that every worry, every financial setback, and every moment of doubt is nothing more than an invitation to return to the feeling of having already arrived at the prosperity you envision. And as you answer that invitation consistently, you notice the subtle ways your subconscious begins to rearrange your life in alignment with your imagined success, where doors open that were previously invisible, connections appear with perfect timing, and opportunities arise in forms that feel almost preordained. And it is in these moments that you realize scarcity has only ever existed as a habit of thought, rather than a fixed reality. And once you commit to the practice of living in the end, embodying the state of having already achieved your financial goals, the universe begins to respond with a consistency that can feel astonishing, yet is simply the logical result of your internal alignment with abundance. And as this alignment strengthens, you find that every decision you make is guided less by fear or limitation, and more by the certainty of someone who knows their worth, capacity, and potential to create wealth without struggle. And gradually, what once felt impossible, paying off debts effortlessly, generating unexpected income streams, and seeing your bank account reflect the reality you have imagined, becomes not only possible, but inevitable. And the more you immerse yourself in this practice, the more effortless it becomes to trust that your financial life is being orchestrated by your own imaginative faculties rather than external forces. And even when old patterns of fear arise, you no longer resist them or identify with them, but instead, you gently guide your thoughts back to the vivid sensation of abundance, allowing the energy of wealth to saturate every aspect of your consciousness. And as a result, your life begins to unfold in a manner that feels both magical and logical, where the external world mirrors the richness of your inner state. And with each passing day, the old anxieties, limitations, and false narratives about money lose their grip, leaving behind only the exhilarating certainty that you are fully capable of rewriting your financial story at will. And in this newfound mastery, you come to understand that your bank account is not the master of your reality, but a reflection, a mirror, and a silent participant in the extraordinary life you have chosen to imagine. And as you continue this journey, every thought, every feeling, and every imagined scene serves as fuel for the creation of the financial life you have always desired, turning what once felt like struggle into an effortless, continuous, and joyful expression of abundance. As this practice becomes more natural, you begin to notice that the world itself starts to bend to the rhythm of your imagination, where ideas for income, solutions to past financial problems, and avenues for growth appear not by chance, but as a direct consequence of the inner state you have cultivated. And in this realization, you understand that money has never been scarce in reality. It is only scarce in perception, and perception is entirely within your control. So when you deliberately focus on imagining yourself living with ease, comfort, and abundance, the circumstances that once seemed fixed begin to shift. And this is where the power of Neville Goddard's method becomes undeniable, because it shows that your financial life is not determined by external authority, economic systems, or even hard work alone, but by the persistent assumption of a state that feels real and complete. And as you practice living in this assumed end, your mind and body begin to respond as though wealth has always been present, influencing your actions, attracting the right people, and highlighting opportunities you might have overlooked before. And even the language you use about money changes subtly yet powerfully, from fear-driven expressions to affirmations of certainty, possibility, and freedom. And as your inner confidence strengthens, you notice that the external world becomes a reflection of this inner reality, so that offers, payments, and unexpected financial gains start to arrive with a regularity that feels both natural and miraculous. And in this process, you come to see that every thought you have carried about limitation was merely a rehearsal, a temporary script that can now be rewritten with precision, clarity, and joy. And as you continue to immerse yourself in the feeling of already having achieved your financial goals, even situations that once seemed insurmountable now feel manageable, guided by intuition, foresight, and the quiet knowing that your imagination has already produced the solution. And gradually, the world itself seems to conspire on your behalf, presenting circumstances and people aligned with the abundance you have assumed, until the former rigidity of your bank account, debts, and financial obligations no longer appears as barriers, but as milestones, marking the passage from one level of assumed wealth to the next. And in this way, the act of imagining, feeling, and living as someone who is already financially fulfilled becomes both a daily practice and a natural state of being, creating a life where money is not a source of worry, scarcity, or stress, but a constant, flowing expression of the richness that resides within you. And ultimately, you realize that this approach does not simply change your finances, but transforms your identity, allowing you to live effortlessly in alignment with the unlimited abundance that has always been your birthright. And as you continue to immerse yourself in this reality, where abundance is assumed rather than chased, you begin to notice that your thoughts about money, which once carried tension, doubt, and fear, now move with ease, clarity, and a quiet certainty that feels both liberating and empowering. And this shift makes it increasingly evident that the actual numbers in your bank account have never been the true measure of your financial potential. Because the energy you carry, the beliefs you embody, and the mental scenes you live in consistently are far more potent than any ledger or statement. And as you cultivate this inner mastery, you realize that your imagination is a tool more powerful than any external system, investment, or strategy, capable of manifesting opportunities, attracting resources, and producing results that appear as if by miracle, yet are simply the natural consequence of living as though the reality you desire is already present. And in this state, you find that financial challenges no longer provoke panic or stress, but instead serve as subtle reminders to return to the feeling of abundance, to re-anchor yourself in the certainty of what you have assumed, and to maintain the alignment between your inner world and the external results you wish to see. And as you consistently practice this, doors open in ways you could never have planned or predicted. Collaborations form with impeccable timing, and ideas for new streams of income arise effortlessly, reinforcing the truth that prosperity flows most easily when it is assumed rather than pursued. And gradually, you begin to notice that even those around you respond differently, drawn to your energy, offering opportunities, guidance, or assistance that seems to arrive at exactly the right moment. And as these synchronicities accumulate, it becomes undeniable that the life you have imagined is being mirrored in your reality. that the scarcity you once feared has no power over someone who consistently inhabits the state of having, and that every challenge, obstacle, or unexpected turn is simply part of the narrative of abundance you are writing, a narrative in which you are both the author and the main character. And ultimately, you come to understand that your bank account, once a source of anxiety or self-doubt, is now merely a reflection, a silent confirmation of the inner world you have deliberately chosen to inhabit. And in embracing this truth, you feel a freedom, a creative power, and a sense of security that cannot be shaken by circumstance, because the reality that truly matters has already been established within. And with each passing day, you find it easier to live as though wealth is not a goal, but a natural, effortless, and continuous expression of the person you have chosen to be. And as this understanding takes deeper root, you begin to notice that gratitude itself becomes an indispensable part of the process, where appreciating even the smallest expressions of abundance, whether a completed task, a helpful conversation, or a minor financial gain, magnifies the feeling of wealth within. And this consistent focus on appreciation shifts your energy so profoundly that it begins to attract not just money, but circumstances, people, and ideas that reinforce the reality of your imagined prosperity. And as you continue to dwell in this state, you realize that every dollar, every opportunity, and every seemingly random coincidence is a reflection of the inner world you have chosen to inhabit. And the more deeply you feel this, the more effortless it becomes to maintain alignment with your assumed financial state, so that actions which once required struggle, sacrifice, or willpower now flow naturally from a place of confidence, clarity, and expectation. And in this rhythm, you see that scarcity has never been anything more than a mental pattern, a habit of thought that dissolves entirely when you persistently focus on abundance. And as you continue to live in this assumed end, your subconscious begins to orchestrate events with precision, bringing people, ideas, and solutions into your life that you could never have engineered consciously. And every challenge that arises ceases to feel threatening, because you know it is simply a nudge to return to the feeling of already having, to re-anchor yourself in the state where wealth is natural, inevitable, and flowing. And gradually, even your bank account begins to reflect the reality you inhabit, as deposits, opportunities, and unexpected gains align with the life you have assumed. And in these moments, you recognize that true prosperity has never been external, nor dependent on luck, timing, or the economy, but has always existed as a potential within you, waiting for the moment when you claim it through imagination, assumption, and the sustained feeling of having. And as this awareness strengthens, the world itself seems to conspire in support of your vision, guiding you toward the precise opportunities that match the life you have imagined. And in embracing this truth fully, you no longer measure success by scarcity or limitation, but by your capacity to remain aligned, to feel wealthy in every moment, and to allow the universe to deliver the physical manifestations that naturally flow from the state of abundance you consistently inhabit, until living in wealth is no longer a practice or technique, but the seamless, undeniable experience of your everyday life. And as you continue to dwell in this state of assumed abundance, you start to notice that the mental stories you once told yourself about limitation, about not having enough, missing opportunities, or being too late, begin to lose their grip, dissolving gradually as you replace them with vivid scenes of financial freedom, where every desire is already fulfilled and every outcome aligns perfectly with the life you have imagined. And in this process, it becomes clear that your imagination is not merely a tool for entertainment or escape, but the actual engine driving your financial reality, shaping circumstances, influencing decisions, and attracting people, opportunities, and resources with impeccable timing. And as this awareness deepens, you find that your responses to money-related situations transform entirely, shifting from fear, hesitation, or anxiety to clarity, confidence, and deliberate action. Because you are now operating from the understanding that wealth is not earned externally, but drawn naturally from the inner state you maintain. And this shift in perception makes the former struggles, setbacks, or misfortunes appear not as failures, but as essential steps, necessary rehearsals in the unfolding story of your prosperity. And as you consistently return to the feeling of already having, your subconscious mind begins to orchestrate the external world with precision, guiding you toward opportunities, collaborations, and financial breakthroughs that previously seemed impossible. And even when circumstances challenge you, they now serve as reminders to anchor yourself in your imagined state, reinforcing the understanding that scarcity has no real power over someone who consistently inhabits abundance. And gradually, you notice that every aspect of your life begins to reflect this inner alignment, from the ease with which you generate ideas, to the clarity with which you recognize profitable situations, and the confidence with which you negotiate, create, and expand. And as the days pass, the bank account, once a source of stress or limitation, now functions merely as a mirror, reflecting the reality that your imagination has long established. And with this perspective, you recognize that the true wealth you seek has never been in external circumstances, but in your ability to consistently assume, feel, and inhabit the state of abundance, so that every action, choice, and thought naturally flows from a place of certainty, creativity, and unstoppable momentum, ultimately allowing you to live a life where financial freedom is not a distant goal, but the inevitable outcome of the reality you have consciously created and continue to inhabit. And as you continue to immerse yourself in this inner world where abundance is already assumed, you begin to notice that the external world, which once seemed rigid, unpredictable, or indifferent, now appears flexible, responsive, and even eager to align with the reality you consistently inhabit. And this awareness reveals that financial challenges, missed opportunities, or unexpected setbacks are not signs of limitation, but subtle nudges, invitations to return to the state of having, to re-anchor yourself in the certainty that wealth is not something to chase, but something to embody. And as you practice this, you discover that every interaction, every decision, and every fleeting thought carries weight in shaping the unfolding of your financial life, so that your imagination becomes not just a mental exercise, but the guiding force of your reality. And as this understanding grows, you begin to notice synchronicities and patterns that seem orchestrated, where conversations lead to opportunities, ideas generate income, and timing feels almost preordained. And in these moments, the former anxieties, fears, and doubts about money lose their significance, replaced by a quiet confidence that comes from knowing your inner world governs your outer reality. And as you maintain this alignment, even unexpected financial challenges transform into stepping stones, evidence that your imagination and assumption are shaping circumstances exactly as they should. And gradually, you begin to recognize that the law of assumption does not merely influence small outcomes, but governs every aspect of your financial experience. From the consistent arrival of resources to the creation of new streams of income and the effortless recognition of opportunities that match your envisioned reality. And with each passing day, the energy you carry begins to radiate outward, attracting people, ideas, and circumstances that reinforce the life you have imagined, so that wealth ceases to feel like a distant goal and instead becomes a natural, flowing expression of your consciousness. And in this ongoing process, you realize that your bank account, which once seemed the ultimate arbiter of success, is now merely a reflection, a silent witness to the reality you have deliberately assumed and sustained within. And by consistently inhabiting this state, you are no longer dependent on external validation, chance, or timing, because the abundance you seek is not outside of you, but always within, ready to manifest in every aspect of your life, in response to the clarity, belief, and feeling you maintain as you continue to live fully as someone who has already achieved financial freedom. And as this awareness settles more deeply, you begin to notice that the very language you use about money, wealth, and opportunity shifts almost imperceptibly, moving away from expressions of lack, fear, or limitation, and instead reflecting certainty, expectation, and abundance. And this subtle change in words carries immense power because thought and speech are extensions of your inner state. And when they align with the reality you assume, they reinforce the manifestation of the financial life you envision. And as you consistently inhabit this state, you realize that the nervous tension, worry, and second-guessing that once dominated your financial decisions are no longer necessary. because the clarity and confidence of someone who already possesses what they desire guide every choice effortlessly. And in this space, opportunities that previously seemed coincidental or unattainable now appear naturally and predictably, as if the universe itself is conspiring in alignment with your imagined reality. And every challenge that arises becomes a reminder to return to the feeling of already having, to re-anchor yourself in the certainty that wealth is not something you chase, but a natural extension of the inner state you maintain. And gradually, you notice that even your habits, daily routines, and interactions are subtly transformed by this inner alignment, steering you toward decisions and actions that serve the manifestation of abundance. And with each passing day, the synchronicities increase. The timing of opportunities becomes impeccable, and the sense of control over your financial life grows stronger, until the old notion that your bank account dictated your success feels almost laughable in comparison to the quiet, unshakable knowledge that your imagination has always been the true source of creation. And in these moments, you understand that every dollar, every contract, and every unexpected windfall is a reflection, a confirmation, and a manifestation of the inner state you have cultivated. And as you continue to practice living from this perspective, you realize that wealth is no longer a distant goal, but an inevitable expression of who you have chosen to be, and that the life you have imagined is already being mirrored with precision, turning what once felt impossible into a seamless, flowing, and continuous experience of abundance that grows stronger with every thought, feeling, and imagined scene. And as you continue to dwell in this state of assumed abundance, you begin to notice that detaching from old habits of scarcity and comparison becomes increasingly natural, where the need to measure yourself against others, to fret over what you do or do not have, or to worry about timing or market conditions gradually dissolves, and in its place emerges a quiet confidence that the life you imagine is unfolding exactly as it should. And this detachment does not lead to complacency, but rather to a heightened clarity, allowing you to recognize opportunities with precision, to act decisively, and to align every choice with the vision of financial freedom you have assumed. And as this process deepens, the subtle, often unnoticed thoughts that once reinforced limitation are replaced by persistent awareness of your power to create, so that even minor financial decisions feel infused with purpose, direction, and inevitability. And you begin to realize that every obstacle, delay, or perceived shortage is nothing more than a signal to return to the inner state of wealth, to remind yourself that abundance is not dependent on circumstance, but on the consistent assumption of having already arrived. And as this alignment strengthens, you notice that external events and interactions increasingly reflect your inner state, producing opportunities, connections, and resources that appear perfectly timed, as if the world itself is conspiring to support the reality you inhabit. And gradually, your bank account, once a source of tension or judgment, begins to mirror the richness you have assumed, reflecting not just monetary gain, but the culmination of a mental and emotional state cultivated deliberately. And in these moments, you recognize that the law of assumption governs everything from the smallest financial detail to the largest life-changing opportunity. And by consistently returning to the feeling of having, you cultivate a life where scarcity, fear, and doubt no longer hold sway, and where your inner certainty translates into external manifestation with breathtaking consistency. And ultimately, you understand that the greatest power you have ever held over your finances was never in external control, strategic planning, or effortful struggle, but in the deliberate, persistent choice to inhabit the state of abundance, to assume wealth as a living, tangible reality, and to allow the universe to reflect that assumption effortlessly, continuously, and unmistakably. And as you deepen this practice, you begin to notice the vital role that faith plays in every aspect of your financial experience, where trust in the unseen, in the invisible workings of your imagination, and in the certainty that the life you envision is already real, becomes the engine that propels your circumstances into alignment. And this faith is not blind or passive, but active, a conscious and persistent awareness that your inner reality shapes the outer world with absolute precision. And as you cultivate this trust, you start to see that even when external evidence seems contrary, your consistent assumption of wealth and abundance remains unshaken, guiding decisions, actions, and perceptions in a way that consistently reinforces the reality you have chosen. And gradually, the anxieties, fears, and doubts that once governed your relationship with money begin to fade, replaced by clarity, confidence, and an intuitive understanding of how to navigate opportunities, risks, and challenges with poise and certainty. And as you continue to inhabit this inner state, the universe begins to provide confirmations in subtle yet undeniable ways, from unexpected payments and fortuitous encounters to insights and inspirations that feel perfectly timed. And in these moments, you recognize that the power to create financial freedom has never resided in external authority, wealth systems, or the opinions of others, but entirely within your ability to assume, feel, and believe that prosperity is already yours. And as this faith strengthens, you notice that your thoughts, actions, and habits naturally align with abundance, so that even ordinary decisions carry extraordinary influence over your financial trajectory. And gradually, what once seemed like struggle, waiting, or lack is replaced by effortless creation, confident action, and a continuous flow of opportunities that confirm the reality you have imagined. And in this ongoing process, your bank account, relationships, and material circumstances become reflections of the trust, clarity, and faith you have cultivated internally. And ultimately, you come to understand that true financial power is not measured by transactions, accounts, or balance sheets, but by the unwavering certainty, faith, and imagination that shapes every moment, action, and opportunity into a life where wealth is not merely possible, but inevitable, continuous, and fully aligned with the version of yourself who has already achieved everything you desire. And as this awareness grows, you begin to see why relying on external validation for your financial worth is not only unnecessary, but counterproductive, where the temptation to measure success by bank statements, societal approval, or comparison with others only serves to distract from the true source of wealth, which resides entirely within your imagination and the state of consciousness you consistently inhabit. And once you fully embrace this, you notice that the pressure, anxiety, and tension you once felt in relation to money begin to dissolve, replaced by a quiet confidence and a sense of creative authority. And in this state, opportunities that previously seemed random or inaccessible start to appear naturally, as if drawn by the undeniable energy of someone who already embodies abundance. And as you continue to operate from this inner authority, your choices, actions, and perceptions align effortlessly with the life you have assumed, so that even challenges, setbacks, or financial surprises are no longer feared but recognized as signals to return to the feeling of having, reinforcing your alignment with prosperity. And gradually, you find that your decisions require less effort, worry, or calculation, because your inner state now governs the flow of external circumstances, attracting the precise people, resources, and situations that support the manifestation of your imagined reality. And in this process, you begin to see that the life you desire has never been contingent on external approval, timing, or validation, but has always been a reflection of your inner certainty, imagination, and assumption. And as your confidence strengthens, even the most ordinary moments carry a subtle creative power, influencing outcomes and opening doors that once felt impossible. Until the bank account, investments, and financial outcomes that once caused stress now function merely as indicators of the abundance you have already assumed. And ultimately, you recognize that the measure of your financial reality is not external but internal, determined by the clarity, faith, and imaginative power you consistently bring to every thought, feeling, and decision. And as this truth becomes second nature, living in wealth ceases to be a pursuit and instead becomes the effortless, continuous experience of a person who has assumed their prosperity, commanding the flow of money, opportunities, and resources with the certainty, creativity, and authority that only comes from knowing that your imagination is the ultimate arbiter of financial reality. And as this perspective settles deeper, you begin to notice that aligning your daily actions with the reality you have assumed becomes almost instinctive, where choices that once felt laborious or uncertain now flow naturally, guided by the inner certainty that abundance is already yours. And this alignment transforms not only the way you approach finances, but also the way you perceive challenges, setbacks, or moments of scarcity, which now appear as subtle cues, opportunities to reinforce the feeling of having and to recalibrate your focus on the imagined life of wealth and freedom. And as you consistently inhabit this state, you find that people, ideas, and circumstances begin to present themselves with a synchrony that feels almost miraculous, as if your imagination has rewritten the narrative of your financial life so completely that the universe itself is compelled to mirror it. And even when obstacles arise, they no longer provoke panic, doubt, or frustration, but instead act as gentle reminders to return to the sensation of abundance, to reaffirm the inner state of someone who has already achieved the prosperity they seek. And gradually, your bank account, your investments, and your tangible resources begin to reflect the inner reality you have cultivated, providing confirmation and encouragement that your imaginative efforts are translating into concrete results. And in these moments, you recognize that the old stories of limitation, struggle, and lack were never truth, but merely rehearsals for the life you're now actively creating. And as this understanding deepens, you notice that your creative energy extends beyond money, influencing opportunities, relationships, and decisions in ways that consistently support the vision of abundance you have assumed. And with each passing day, the alignment between your inner state and external manifestations grows stronger, making it increasingly effortless to maintain the feeling of wealth and certainty, regardless of temporary fluctuations or challenges. And ultimately, you realize that the practice of assuming financial freedom is not a technique or trick, but a complete transformation of identity, perspective, and action, allowing you to live continuously from the state of having, where money flows naturally, opportunities multiply, and your life becomes a seamless reflection of the inner reality you have deliberately imagined. And in embracing this truth fully, you experience a profound sense of empowerment, clarity, and unstoppable momentum, knowing that every thought, every feeling, and every imagined scene contributes directly to the effortless creation of the abundant, prosperous life that has always been your birthright. And as this process continues, you begin to notice that financial anxiety, which once dominated your thoughts and dictated your decisions, gradually loses its power over you, where every fleeting worry or fear about money is now quickly recognized as a signal to return to the feeling of having, to re-anchor yourself in the certainty that abundance is already present. And this practice transforms not only your mindset, but the very way you interact with the world, so that opportunities, ideas, and resources seem to appear effortlessly, guided by the alignment between your inner state and the external circumstances you are attracting. And as you consistently dwell in this assumed reality, you realize that every challenge, setback, or unexpected expense is merely a temporary distortion, a chance to reinforce your belief in wealth and to practice returning to the sensation of financial freedom. And in doing so, you notice that your subconscious mind begins to orchestrate situations, people, and events in a way that perfectly supports your imagined prosperity, creating a life where abundance flows naturally, without struggle or strain. And as this alignment strengthens, the way you perceive money shifts entirely, so that it is no longer a source of stress, limitation, or obligation, but a reflection of the inner state you maintain, a mirror confirming the reality you have chosen to inhabit. And gradually, you begin to understand that your imagination, assumptions, and feelings are infinitely more powerful than external circumstances, and that by consistently assuming the state of financial fulfillment, you are effectively rewriting every aspect of your monetary experience, attracting resources, solutions, and collaborations with precision, so that even what once felt impossible now appears inevitable, and every decision you make is guided not by fear or scarcity, but by clarity, creativity, and the unshakable awareness that you are the ultimate creator of your financial reality. And in this ongoing process, the bank account, once a source of doubt, becomes merely a reflection of the inner abundance you have cultivated, confirming the truth that wealth is not earned or acquired externally, but manifested effortlessly from the powerful, deliberate, and consistent state of consciousness you choose to inhabit each day. ultimately allowing you to live in a continuous, unstoppable flow of prosperity, security, and freedom. And as you deepen this practice, you begin to realize that attracting opportunities is far more effective than chasing money. Because when you consistently dwell in the feeling of already having what you desire, circumstances, people, and resources are naturally drawn toward you, as if responding to an invisible current created by your unwavering assumption. And this understanding transforms the way you approach every decision, every interaction, and every plan, shifting your focus from anxious pursuit to deliberate alignment, so that your actions effortlessly reflect the reality you have already assumed. And as this alignment strengthens, you notice that solutions, ideas, and collaborations seem to appear at exactly the right moment, guided by intuition and the subtle orchestration of the circumstances you have mentally established. And even setbacks or delays lose their former power to disturb you, becoming instead gentle reminders to reaffirm your inner state of abundance, to dwell more fully in the sensation of already having, and to trust the process that consistently delivers results in perfect timing. And as you continue to immerse yourself in this way of living, your bank account, income streams, and material resources gradually come into harmony with the inner reality you maintain, reflecting not only financial gain, but the clarity, confidence, and creativity that has become your natural state. And in these moments, you recognize that the wealth you are experiencing is not contingent on effort, luck, or external validation, but on your persistent, deliberate assumption of abundance, and that the universe operates in perfect coordination with the state you inhabit, producing opportunities, breakthroughs, and connections that align seamlessly with your imagined life. And gradually, even ordinary days are infused with subtle confirmations, unexpected windfalls, and synchronistic encounters, reinforcing the understanding that your imagination, faith, and feeling are the ultimate creators of your financial reality. And ultimately, you realize that the ability to attract wealth effortlessly, continuously, and without struggle is not an external skill, but an internal mastery, cultivated through deliberate thought, sustained feeling, and unwavering belief, allowing your life to unfold as a living expression of the prosperity, opportunity, and abundance you have already assumed as your natural state. And as this understanding grows, you begin to recognize that your subconscious mind is the true bank where all wealth is stored, where every belief, expectation, and imagined scene functions as a deposit that eventually manifests in the physical world. And once you fully grasp this, you notice that the external numbers in your account are merely reflections, delayed echoes of the inner reality you have deliberately created. And in this realization, every thought and feeling takes on immense significance, because the alignment, clarity, and certainty you cultivate within directly influence the flow of opportunities, resources, and financial confirmations in your life. And as you continue to immerse yourself in the sensation of already having, the nervous tension, worry, and desperation that once dictated your relationship with money dissolve entirely, replaced by a steady, unshakable confidence that wealth is your natural state. And this confidence informs every choice, every action, and every conversation, so that your life begins to reflect the prosperity, freedom, and creativity you have imagined with remarkable precision. And gradually, you observe that even what once seemed like chance occurrences, unexpected deals, timely contacts, and financial breakthroughs, are in fact orchestrated outcomes of the state you maintain in your mind. And as this awareness strengthens, you realize that no external circumstance can limit the abundance that originates from your subconscious, which acts as the ultimate creator, guiding opportunities, resources, and solutions to align perfectly with the life you have assumed. And in this process, every interaction, decision, and subtle act becomes an extension of your inner state, a confirmation of the reality you have imagined and assumed as inevitable. And over time, the bank account, investments, and material results all mirror the richness, clarity, and certainty that you have cultivated within, leaving you free to focus entirely on the consistent feeling of wealth rather than the numbers themselves. And ultimately, you understand that the true source of financial mastery lies not in external strategies, effort, or timing, but in the persistent, deliberate, and joyous cultivation of the subconscious state where abundance is unquestioned, fully present, and continuously expressed in every area of your life, producing a seamless flow of prosperity that feels effortless, natural, and unstoppable. And as this awareness matures, you begin to perceive that the feeling of wealth, the assumption of financial freedom, and the consistent imagining of abundance are not just practices, but the very essence of creation, where every dollar, opportunity, and resource that enters your life is a reflection of the inner state you maintain. And in this understanding, you notice that past fears, doubts, and struggles no longer hold power, because you now approach every situation from the perspective of someone who has already arrived at the life they desire. And as you consistently inhabit this state, the universe responds with remarkable precision, orchestrating circumstances, people, and opportunities that align perfectly with your imagined reality. And even challenges, delays, or temporary setbacks are reframed as subtle nudges, reminders to return fully to the feeling of having, to reaffirm the certainty that abundance is already present. And gradually, your external life, including your bank account, investments, and tangible resources, begins to mirror this inner certainty, providing evidence that your imagination has been the true architect of your financial reality all along. And in these moments, you realize that effort, struggle, and chasing are no longer necessary, because the power to create wealth is not found in external action, but in the deliberate, consistent cultivation of a state where financial freedom is already assumed. And as this alignment deepens, opportunities, collaborations, and unexpected gains flow effortlessly, with timing that seems orchestrated and outcomes that feel preordained. And every choice you make, every thought you think, and every feeling you cultivate reinforces the reality of abundance, until living in wealth is no longer a conscious effort, but a natural, continuous expression of the person you have become. And ultimately, you understand that your bank account, once a source of stress or limitation, is now merely a reflection of the inner world you have deliberately crafted, confirming that prosperity is not external, but originates entirely from the imaginative, intentional, and unwavering state you choose to inhabit, allowing you to live fully, confidently, and effortlessly as someone whose financial reality has already been established within and is now manifesting flawlessly in the world around you. And now, as you reflect on the journey you have undertaken, it becomes unmistakably clear that every struggle, every fear, every fleeting doubt was never an obstacle, but a necessary rehearsal, a series of lessons designed to prepare you to fully embody the financial reality you have long imagined. And in this moment, you realize that wealth is not a distant goal, a prize to be earned, or a measure imposed by the world, but the natural consequence of deliberately assuming the state of having and consistently feeling, thinking, and living as someone who already possesses the prosperity they desire. And as this understanding settles deeply, you notice that the universe itself seems to conspire in your favor, orchestrating people, circumstances, opportunities, and ideas with a precision that mirrors the inner clarity, faith, and certainty you have cultivated. And every interaction, decision, and subtle choice now flows effortlessly from the energy of someone who has arrived, where challenges no longer provoke fear, but serve as gentle reminders to return to the feeling of abundance, to reaffirm the inner reality that precedes manifestation. And gradually, your bank account, resources, and external life reflect this inner mastery, functioning as a mirror that confirms the truth you have long known, that the source of wealth, prosperity, and opportunity has always been within you, shaped by imagination, assumption, and unwavering belief. And as you continue to dwell in this state, the flow of abundance becomes seamless, continuous, and inevitable, touching every area of your life with ease and grace, until living in wealth is no longer a technique, practice, or goal, but the effortless, undeniable, and joyful expression of your identity, where money, opportunities, and success manifest naturally because you have assumed, felt, and fully inhabited the state of already having, leaving you free to experience life as someone whose financial reality is not determined by external circumstances, chance, or struggle, but by the deliberate, conscious, and unwavering power of imagination, faith, and the certainty that abundance is your natural, continuous, and fully realized state of being. And now, as you reflect on the journey you have undertaken, it becomes unmistakably clear that every struggle, every fear, every fleeting doubt was never an obstacle, but a necessary rehearsal. A series of lessons designed to prepare you to fully embody the financial reality you have long imagined. And in this moment, you realize that wealth is not a distant goal, a prize to be earned, or a measure imposed by the world, but the natural consequence of deliberately assuming the state of having and consistently feeling, thinking, and living as someone who already possesses the prosperity they desire. And as this understanding settles deeply, you notice that the universe itself seems to conspire in your favor, orchestrating people, circumstances, opportunities, and ideas with a precision that mirrors the inner clarity, faith, and certainty you have cultivated. And every interaction, decision, and subtle choice now flows effortlessly from the energy of someone who has arrived, where challenges no longer provoke fear, but serve as gentle reminders to return to the feeling of abundance, to reaffirm the inner reality that precedes manifestation. And gradually, your bank account, resources, and external life reflect this inner mastery, functioning as a mirror that confirms the truth you have long known: that the source of wealth, prosperity, and opportunity has always been within you, shaped by imagination, assumption, and unwavering belief. And as you continue to dwell in this state, the flow of abundance becomes seamless, continuous, and inevitable, touching every area of your life with ease and grace, until living in wealth is no longer a technique, practice, or goal, but the effortless, undeniable, and joyful expression of your identity, where money, opportunities, and success manifest naturally because you have assumed, felt, and fully inhabited the state of already having, leaving you free to experience life as someone whose financial reality is not determined by external circumstances, chance, or struggle, but by the deliberate, conscious, and unwavering power of imagination, faith, and the certainty that abundance is your natural, continuous, and fully realized state of being.